Hello everyone, and welcome to part 2 of this painting. We'll be talking about what went right, what went wrong, and what I did to correct that. We're starting right off on the left-hand side of this piece. I'm using a cool light blue as the base color of these stones, and then I'm going over that with a cool light gray. These stones were quite textured early on, but I decided they were too distracting as a background element, so I smoothed them out later on. Here I am using an equally light but much warmer blue to define a part of the wall that will have a light shaft falling over it later. I am using a cool blue to undertone most of the background elements, both to help unify them and to help them recede in space. You may notice parts of this video skip forward a bit. My camera was turning off on me without any warning, and I didn't always catch it right away. My lifting the piece once in a while is just me making sure my scratch pad is in the right place. I left the areas at the tops of the windows uncolored for now because I still wasn't sure at this point just how decorative I wanted them to be. And here I'm using the same cool blue to cool the browns in the background. And here is where I mess up big time. Rather than grabbing the lighter, warmer brown that I had intended to use to designate the light shafts, I grabbed the same cooler brown that I had been using for the parts of the background that were not in light. By the time I realized what I had done, I had to roll with my mistake. With alcohol markers, there's no lifting, and there's no coming in with a lighter marker to lighten an area. You can only go darker. Here I changed direction for a little while and worked on the windows while I tried to decide what I was going to do about my mistake. For consistency's sake, I needed to use that same brown across all the window frames. Initially, I tried going over most of the background to darken it, but that didn't provide enough contrast, and I was afraid of darkening things too much, or else they would start competing with the foreground. I think by this point I had settled on the idea of using some gouache to correct this coloring mistake. There's one of those skips I mentioned earlier. Here I'm going lightly over my figure to redefine where I want the edges of my shadows and highlights to be. You want as little graphite down as possible because it can clog the tips of alcohol markers. Here I'm using a cool blue to begin defining the shadows on her altar. This cool blue is in the same family as the cool blue I've used in the background. This helps maintain color harmony across the entire piece, and it helps make sure these secondary elements don't draw too much attention to themselves. I'm letting the foreground dry for a little bit while I resolve these windows in the back. The foreground shadows are going to need a lot of layers to get them as dark as I want, and I want those layers to dry between each application. On this part of the floor that will be in the light, I'm using a much warmer blue. It's almost a green. I will come in later once I have these shadows as dark as I want them. I will cover all of this with a warm gray, and that will help to unify these very different shades we're seeing right now. And I've just been working back and forth, darkening these undertones. Typically, you can make an initial pass over an area, and then a second pass with the same marker to darken it some. After that, you will need to use a darker marker to continue darkening the area. And I apologize, there was another camera skip there. The shift in color in these areas is from a layer of warm gray, and you'll see me continuing to go over these areas, building up layers and darkening them. Starting on her skin, I'm using my colorless blender to pre-wet the area, and then adding a layer of my very light blue. It may seem a little incongruous to use the same blue that I used in the background, and now take it and use it on the main character. There are two reasons for this. The first being that I want as many shades as possible to help define the rounded parts of her body. And secondly, when working in any media, it's a good idea to take some of your background colors and apply them to the shadows of your subject matter. This will help your subject feel grounded within your piece rather than pasted in. The closer you get to the central point of focus in your painting, the more you can move away from incorporating background colors into your shadows. For example, in this piece, her feet and her legs will be quite dark compared to her face and upper torso. Moving to her clothing, I know I can start with a darker shade because her clothing will be darker than her skin. Going back to her skin. Now, I'm shading it with the same colors I used on her outfit. This will help later on when applying the main colors to keep them from clashing with each other. You'll notice parts of her torso are not being toned, and that's because I want the skin colors at their purest and brightest there in order to draw attention. And now I'm toning the skulls with the same range of blues. And again, this is to make sure all these subordinate elements of the painting aren't competing with the main subject in the final piece. The undertones on her skin have had time to dry now, so I'm starting with the lightest color and going and getting gradually darker in the shadows. I will use this same range of skin tones on the sunlit parts of her skin. And you will see what a traffic difference the blue tones make. Even though I had done some color studies, I was having some doubts about this piece coming together. It all started falling into place once I layered on the pink. Here in the bottom right corner, I had to be especially careful to make sure to subordinate the edge of her skirt. I did this by making sure it was a similar value, if not color, to the stone in that corner. This was to help prevent it from leading the eye off the edge. I decided some areas would look better with a little more detail in the inking, so that's what I'm doing with my black pen. The white gel pen is to bolster the room lighting. I don't know why my lighting seems to be all over the place here. Masked off the areas of the sun shafts, and I've started painting in with my gouache. I did a very light wash of lemon yellow and titanium white to begin with, and then I came back over it with a thicker wash. I finished them off with a few strokes of almost pure white. These ended up being a more saturated yellow than I originally intended. Luckily, the pink of her outfit helped to balance them out a bit. Thank you so much for watching. As always, please like, comment, subscribe. It helps me so much, and I will see you in the next video.